It happened during a warm summer when I was around 12 years old. My mom, my younger brother, and I were staying in a hotel in a fairly large city, visiting some extended family but choosing not to stay at their place. My brother was quite a bit younger than me, so it was often my job to keep an eye on him wherever we went. The day we arrived, my mom asked me to do just that while she went to the front desk to check us in and collect our room key. So my brother and I settled onto a couch in the lobby, letting ourselves relax a bit while waiting. The couch faced the glass doors at the front of the hotel, giving us a clear view of the entrance. I remember the way the automatic doors would slide open with a soft hiss, letting in the warm breeze from outside. That's when a man, probably in his mid-40s, stepped inside. I could see him clearly as he entered, a completely average-looking man, the kind of face you could walk past a dozen times and never notice again. Trying to describe him would be like trying to hold on to a shadow. It would probably generate 100 different images, none of them exactly right. What caught my attention wasn't how he looked, but what he did. He walked in and, without even glancing toward the front desk, made his way over and sat down on the couch directly across from us. At first, I didn't think much of it. People sit in hotel lobbies all the time, waiting for rides or family, or maybe just to rest. But then, a quiet unease crept up the back of my neck as I realized he hadn't stopped by the counter at all. He hadn't checked in, hadn't spoken to anyone. He had just walked in from the street and sat down, his eyes shifting occasionally, but never really landing on anything for long. Maybe I was being paranoid, but a thought came to me then, and it settled in my chest like a stone. What if he had followed us in from the parking lot? The idea made the air around me feel a little heavier, and I found myself pulling my younger brother a bit closer as he swung his feet above the lobby floor, unaware of my growing tension. Thankfully, before the discomfort could deepen, my mom called out to us, waving the room key in her hand and letting us know the room was ready. I stood up quickly, taking my brother's hand, and we left the lobby, heading toward the elevators, the man in the lobby slipping from view as the doors closed behind us. Not long after settling into our room, we left the hotel to meet up with family, and honestly, the man from the lobby slipped from my mind for the rest of the day. We spent the afternoon in the warm city air, surrounded by the chatter of family and the sounds of traffic in the distance, and it was easy to forget about that strange moment back in the lobby. It was around 7 in the evening when we finally returned to the hotel. The sky was shifting to that deep, dusky blue, and the streetlights were flickering on, one by one. As we stepped back into the softly lit hotel lobby, my mom turned to us with a small smile and said we could go swimming in the hotel pool before bed. We all headed up to our room, the hallway carpet muffling our footsteps, and changed into our swimsuits, the excitement of a night swim washing away the heaviness of travel. A few minutes later, we made our way down to the pool area, the faint smell of chlorine mixing with the cool air as we slipped into the water. The water was warm against the cooler evening air, and for a moment it felt like we were the only ones in the world, the quiet splashes and echoes of our voices bouncing off the tiled walls. Then, the door to the pool area opened with a slow creak, letting in a gust of cooler air. I glanced over and felt a cold prickle crawl across my skin. It was him. The same man from the lobby stepped inside and quietly took a seat on one of the lounge chairs by the wall. He was wearing jeans and a sweater, sitting there rigidly, his hands folded in his lap, his eyes moving but never really settling anywhere for too long. He didn't look like someone who had just come in for a swim. He looked like someone who was waiting. At first, I tried to brush it off, splashing water with my brother and pretending not to notice. But then, I saw the way my mom's face shifted. Her smile faded, replaced by a tightness around her eyes that made my stomach twist. She leaned closer to me, her voice low, almost a whisper, as she nodded subtly in his direction. "If he doesn't leave in 5 minutes, we're going back to the room." There was a seriousness in her tone that made me realize she was genuinely worried, and that fear started to press down on me too, heavy and cold, making the warm water feel suddenly uncomfortable against my skin. We waited, watching the clock on the wall tick by painfully slowly, each minute dragging out as the man sat there, unmoving, just watching the water, his gaze flickering occasionally toward us before drifting back to the tiled floor. 5 minutes passed. He was still there. My mom gave me a look, and without a word we gathered our things, our towels damp and clinging to our arms, the water dripping from us, leaving small puddles on the pool deck as we hurried out. I glanced back once, just before we stepped through the door, and saw him still sitting there, his head turning slightly as we left, his eyes following us. By the time we got back to our room, it was close to 8 o'clock. The unease clung to us like a chill we couldn't shake, and I noticed the way my mom double-checked the lock on the door before she finally sat down. We had brought a rented movie to watch that night, something to help us unwind and push away the strangeness of the evening, and the plan was to watch it and head straight to bed. As we settled in, the glow of the TV screen flickering in the darkened room, I couldn't help but notice how my mom kept glancing toward the door, her shoulders tense, her eyes sharp every time a sound came from the hallway outside. It was clear the man had unsettled her deeply, and seeing her on edge like that made the worry in my own chest grow, spreading slowly until even the comforting glow of the movie couldn't quite drown it out. Halfway through the movie, as the flickering glow of the screen painted shadows across the hotel room walls, my mom got up and headed to the bathroom to take a shower. The sound of running water filled the room, masking the low hum of the air conditioner, and I tried to focus on the movie, letting the familiar voices on the screen distract me from the unease that had settled into my chest since the pool. Then there was a knock at the door. I froze, my eyes shifting to the door as a voice came through, muffled but clear enough to understand. "Housekeeping?" I blinked, glancing at the glowing red numbers on the digital clock beside the bed. It was late, too late for housekeeping to be making their rounds, and a small, sharp chill crawled down my spine as I sat there, the light from the TV flickering across the carpet. But we did need another towel. Trying to reason with myself, I got up slowly, my feet sinking slightly into the carpet with each step, the sound of the shower still running in the background, steam faintly drifting from the crack beneath the bathroom door. I wish I hadn't been so stupid. I opened the door just a crack, enough for the hallway light to spill into the room and for me to see who was standing there. It was him. The same man from the lobby, the same man from the pool. Standing there in the dimly lit hallway, he gave me a slow, unsettling smile, lifting his hand in a small wave that felt anything but friendly. I just stood there, frozen, my mind instantly spiraling into a panic that made the edges of my vision tighten. Thoughts of kidnapping, of being dragged down the hallway, of terrible things I didn't even want to put words to, filled my head in that single, endless moment. Behind me, the sound of the water in the bathroom suddenly stopped, the pipes creaking as the shower turned off, leaving the room in a heavy, suffocating silence. The man just stood there, his eyes fixed on me, the smile still on his face as if it were carved there. And then he spoke, his voice calm, almost casual, which made it all the more terrifying. "How was your swim?" My heart dropped, a cold, nauseating fear gripping me as I realized he had been watching us, keeping track of us, remembering details he shouldn't know. At that moment, the bathroom door opened, and my mom stepped out, her hair damp, a towel around her shoulders, the steam from the shower rolling into the room. Her eyes fell on the man standing in the doorway, and in an instant, her expression shifted from confusion to something sharp and protective. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed my arm, pulling me back so quickly I stumbled and slammed the door shut with a heavy thud that echoed in the room, the sound final and loud in the silence that followed. I heard the lock click as she turned it, her hands shaking slightly as she stepped back from the door, her breathing quick. She picked up the hotel phone immediately, dialing the front desk with trembling fingers, her eyes never leaving the door as she spoke, her voice low but firm as she reported the man who had just shown up pretending to be housekeeping. "Call the police," I urged her, the fear and adrenaline making my voice crack, but she didn't, choosing instead to handle it quietly, hoping the front desk would take care of it. She asked to switch rooms, her voice tight, her eyes darting to the peephole as if expecting him to be standing there, waiting. From where I stood, I heard footsteps outside, heavy and quick, stomping down the hallway away from our room, fading into the distance, until the only sounds left were the low hum of the air conditioner and the muffled voices from the TV, which suddenly felt too loud in the heavy silence. Thankfully, after that, we didn't see him again. The hotel moved us to a different room, and although the new room looked the same, it felt different, safer somehow, with the memory of his smile still lingering in the back of my mind like a stain that wouldn't wash away. And during the rest of our stay, even though the days passed without another sighting of him, I never quite stopped listening for footsteps outside our door. Have you ever felt that creeping unease when staying in a hotel room, especially when you're alone? Probably not. Most people haven't even spent a night alone in a hotel room before. But when I was a kid, it was something that always got to me. The thought of sleeping in a hotel room would fill me with a quiet dread, an irrational fear that would crawl under my skin and refuse to leave. Every 20 seconds or so, I would find myself glancing over my shoulder, peering into the dark corners of the room, half expecting, no, fully expecting, to see someone standing there in the shadows, watching me silently. That fear didn't just torment me, it drove my parents crazy too. Night after night, I would insist on crawling between them in bed, clutching the blanket and forcing myself to stay awake, straining my ears for every creak and groan of the hotel building around us. It went on like that until I was around 9 or 10, too old to admit that I was still afraid, but too scared to let it go. Eventually, I had to grow up, or at least pretend to. I started sleeping in my own bed or sometimes sharing one with my sister during trips, pushing the fear down and telling myself it was childish nonsense that needed to be left behind. Now, I'm 24 years old, living on my own, with a job that has me traveling constantly for business. I've spent more nights alone in hotel rooms than I can count, the empty silence of those spaces becoming something I've had to learn to tolerate. On one particular business trip, I found myself staying at a Comfort Inn in North Carolina, everything paid for by the company, of course. I was in town for a meeting with another office a few towns over, and the Comfort Inn was my temporary home for the night. I don't remember much about the surroundings, just that it was across the street from a large car dealership, its bright lights spilling into the road even late at night. The next day was a day off for me, so I had nothing to look forward to except relaxing in the room, sinking into the stiff hotel mattress, and watching a few movies until I fell asleep. It was a simple plan, one I was actually looking forward to, with the promise of a quiet, undisturbed night. Ironically, the movie I chose to watch was the first Saw film, and there was this one scene where Adam is in his apartment, hearing strange sounds, peering into the darkness, tension threading through every frame. And it was during that exact scene that I felt it again. A flicker of that old childhood paranoia creeping back into my chest, tightening around my lungs, making me pause for just a moment. Because I thought I heard something. A faint crackling sound, like something shifting slowly, coming from inside the closet across the room. The door was closed, but I found myself staring at it, the shadows around it suddenly feeling darker, heavier, the air in the room pressing down on me as the sounds from the movie seemed to echo the quiet noises in the room. I was 24, an adult, living on my own, traveling for work. I told myself I had to get over it, that I wasn't a child anymore, that this was just the darkness playing tricks on my mind, stirred up by a horror movie. Forcing a laugh, I reached for the remote and turned up the volume, letting the noise from the TV drown out whatever quiet sounds I thought I had heard, trying to push the fear away. At the same time, I popped 2 sleeping pills into my mouth, washing them down with a gulp of water, telling myself that by the time the movie was over, I would be wiped out, drifting off to sleep before any childish fears could pull me back into that restless paranoia. Eventually, I reached for the remote and flipped off the TV, the room sinking into a heavy darkness, the glow of the screen leaving faint ghosts of light across the ceiling before disappearing entirely. I rolled over onto my side, pulling the thin hotel blanket up around me, ready to finally get some sleep. That was when I heard it again, the crackling noise. It wasn't constant, just this irregular, faint crackling sound coming from the direction of the closet. Every minute or so, there it was again, a soft, brittle sound that was impossible to properly describe, like something brushing lightly against the inside of the closet door, or something shifting just slightly within. It wasn't happening often enough to truly bother me, and the sleeping pills were doing their job, pulling at my eyelids, making everything feel soft and heavy. My mind drifted in and out, the fear pressing at the edges of my thoughts, but not strong enough to drag me fully awake. Within 10 minutes, I was out, sinking into the heavy, drugged sleep that only came when I was too exhausted to fight it. The next thing I remember was waking up to a sound that snapped me from that heavy sleep in an instant. The sound of cloth rustling. It was subtle, but sharp enough to jolt me awake, cutting through the fog of the sleeping pills as I sprang upright in bed. My heart pounded against my ribs as I sat there, trying to see into the darkness around me. It was so dark that I couldn't even see more than a few feet in front of me, the shadows thick and heavy, swallowing everything beyond the faint outline of the bed. I fumbled for the lamp, my fingers shaking as I found the switch and flipped it on. The sudden light flooded the room, pushing back the darkness in a harsh glow. And that was when I saw him. There, by the closet, dressed entirely in black, with a hood pulled over his head, was a man, tall, easily 6'5", and broad, rummaging through my bag on the floor. His gloved hands moved quickly, pulling things out, searching, as if he hadn't even noticed I was awake yet. I opened my mouth and screamed, a raw, terrified sound that tore through the silence of the room, echoing against the walls, the fear from my childhood crashing back in full force, bigger and sharper than ever. At the sound of my scream, he froze, then turned sharply toward me. I couldn't see his face, only the dark outline of his hood, before he bolted for the door, the sound of his heavy footsteps thudding across the thin carpet as he fled the room. I sat there, shaking, the lamp's glow casting sharp, shaking shadows across the walls, the adrenaline making my hands tremble as I struggled to breathe, my chest rising and falling rapidly. I scrambled out of bed, checking my bag, trying to process what had just happened. He had taken my wallet. My watch was gone too. But more than that, he had taken something else. Something that felt so much bigger and deeper than the items he had stuffed into his pockets as he ran. He had reached into a fear I had carried with me since childhood, a fear so specific, so oddly personal, that it felt like a cruel joke to have it play out in real life, in a dark hotel room far from home. I've never seen a story like this on the news. I've never heard anyone talk about something like this happening to them. And for it to happen to me, of all people, someone who had spent so many nights as a child glancing over their shoulder into dark corners, terrified of exactly this, felt catastrophic. And it's something that, no matter how many nights pass, still claws quietly at the edges of my mind whenever I find myself alone in a hotel room, the dark corners of the room feeling just a little too heavy, the silence a little too sharp. When I was 17, things between me and my dad started to go downhill. He's always been a hothead, quick to anger over the smallest things, and as I got older, the tension between us only grew thicker, like a rope pulled too tight, ready to snap. It got to the point where, after one of our explosive arguments about things I'd rather not get into, I would have to leave for the night just to keep the peace, or maybe just to protect myself from saying something I couldn't take back. Sometimes I would crash at a friend's place, trying to laugh off the anger with cheap pizza and old movies, pretending everything was fine. Other times, I would find myself checking into a hotel, paying for a room just so I could have a space where I could breathe. It was May 9th, 2015. I was 21 years old, and after yet another huge blow-up back at home, I knew I had to get out of there. My chest felt tight, my hands shaking with the leftover adrenaline from yelling and slamming doors, and I needed to put distance between me and that house before I lost it completely. So I checked in to a nearby hotel, the Quality Inn and Suites, a generic spot that was literally only half a mile from my house. It felt stupid, throwing away almost $100 for a room when my bed was right down the street. But I didn't have anywhere else to go that night, and I couldn't bear the thought of being under the same roof as him. It was early this time too. Usually these fights happened late at night when everything was already dark and heavy, but this one had blown up around 4 in the afternoon. The sun was still up, the day still bright, but inside, everything felt dim and heavy, the way it always did after a fight. So I decided to hang out by the outdoor pool, hoping the fresh air would help clear my head. It was oddly quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your own thoughts feel louder, more pronounced. I was the only one there, the pool water still, the deck chairs empty, the gentle hum of distant traffic the only sound breaking the silence. It wasn't just the pool that was empty, the hallways were empty too, the carpet swallowing the sound of my footsteps as I walked, the lights humming softly overhead. Even the lobby was empty, except for the desk worker, who barely looked up as I passed by, their presence reminding me that I wasn't completely alone, even if it felt that way. Then again, it was only May, and our town wasn't exactly a big vacation spot. It made sense that the hotel would be quiet, but there was something about the emptiness that felt off, like the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. My room was on the second floor, in the middle of the hallway. I remember thinking it was strange that they had put me there when it seemed like I was one of the only people staying in the hotel. The halls were lined with closed doors, but none of them had the telltale signs of occupancy. No muffled TV sounds, no low voices, no footsteps creaking across the floor above me. Just silence. As I slid the key card into the lock and stepped inside, the door closing with a soft click behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the emptiness of the place wasn't just a coincidence. After spending some time by the pool, letting the warm air cool the leftover tension buzzing in my chest, I headed back to my room. I hung out there for a while, scrolling through my phone, mindlessly flipping through channels on the TV, trying to keep my mind off home and the fight that had driven me here in the first place. That was when I heard it. A very light tapping on the door. Barely there, like the gentle knock of fingernails against wood. I paused, waiting to hear someone call out housekeeping, but the hallway outside remained silent, the only sound the low hum of the air conditioner by the window. I frowned, glancing at the door, and decided to ignore it, figuring maybe they had knocked on the wrong room. I turned my attention back to the TV, trying to focus on the muted glow of the screen. But then I heard it, the soft electronic beep of the lock on the door. My head snapped toward the sound, confusion tightening in my chest as I listened to the soft click of the lock disengaging, and then the slow creak of the door as it began to open, inch by inch. No thank you, not right now," I called out, my voice uncertain, trying to keep it casual. There was a wall blocking the view of the door from where I sat on the bed, so I couldn't see who was there, only the faint slice of brighter light from the hallway spilling onto the carpet as the door opened wider. There was a pause, a silence so sharp it made the hum of the air conditioner feel louder. I repeated myself, my voice louder this time, curiosity mixing with a thread of unease. "Hello?" I said, "No thank you." And then, suddenly, the door slammed shut. The sound was so loud and sudden that it made me jump, my heart thudding in my chest as the echo of the slam rang out in the otherwise quiet room. I sat there for a moment, the shock making my skin prickle, before a flare of irritation cut through the fear. I got up, deciding I would go out there and tell them that slamming the door like that was rude, that I didn't appreciate it, especially when I had the "Do Not Disturb" sign hanging on the handle. When I stepped into the hallway, the lights above casting a sterile glow onto the patterned carpet, I looked to my right. Nothing. The hallway stretched on, empty. I looked to my left, and at the very end of the hall, just before it turned the corner, I saw it. A glimpse of movement. The right leg of a woman, turning the left corner further down the hall, vanishing from sight in an instant. How did she get there so fast? The question flashed through my mind as I broke into a jog, moving quickly down the hall toward the corner, the air feeling heavier with each step, the sound of my footsteps muffled by the carpet. I reached the end of the hall just as I heard it, a soft thud, the sound of another door closing somewhere around the corner. I turned the corner sharply, expecting to see her there, but there was nothing. Just a long stretch of hallway lined with closed hotel room doors, maybe 20 in total, each one shut tight, each one unmarked by any sign of life behind them. Empty, silent. My confusion twisted into something colder, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck prickle as I stood there, looking at those identical closed doors, the silence pressing in around me. Feeling unsettled and a bit rattled, I decided to go down to the front desk to complain about the rude employee. The woman behind the counter looked up as I approached, her eyes tired but kind. I explained what had happened, the knock, the door opening, the sudden slam, and the glimpse of the woman disappearing around the corner. She gave a small, knowing smile. "Ah, that must be Rosa," she said with a shrug, as if that explained everything. "I'll question her about slamming the door later on." I nodded, though the explanation did little to ease the uneasy twist in my stomach. "Yeah, thanks." Trying to shake off the weirdness, I decided to get out of there for a while and clear my head, walking down the road to the nearby TGI Fridays for dinner, the cool evening air doing little to wash away the lingering chill of the empty hallway and the unanswered questions it left behind. When I got back to the room later that evening, I was on the phone with my mom, pacing slowly as I talked. She told me I shouldn't come back home yet, that my dad was still furious, his anger simmering too close to the surface for it to be safe for me to return. I stepped into my room, letting the door close behind me with a soft click as I sank down onto the edge of the bed, the weight of everything pressing down harder now that I was alone again. I told her how tired I was, how depressed all the fighting was making me feel, how it felt like there was no escape from the constant tension. She listened, her voice quiet and understanding, telling me to take care of myself and to try to get some rest. When I hung up, it was only 8 o'clock, but I was done with the day. I wanted it to be over, to close my eyes and have everything go quiet for a while. I brushed my teeth in the dimly lit bathroom, the buzzing of the bathroom fan the only sound in the small space, then returned to the bed and turned on the TV for a bit, letting the low noise fill the silence as I tried to relax. By 9, I decided to call it a night, switching off the TV and pulling the covers up, the darkness folding in around me as I closed my eyes, hoping for sleep to come quickly. I don't know how long I was asleep before I woke to the sound. At first, it didn't register, just a vague noise at the edge of my consciousness, pulling me from sleep. I rubbed my eyes, sitting up slowly in the dark, trying to listen, trying to place the sound that had woken me. That was when I heard it, a voice, low and strained, coming from right beside me. "You have to let them in." My heart slammed against my ribs as I turned my head, and that was when I saw her. There, standing at the left edge of my bed, was a woman, tall and looming, her thin frame silhouetted in the dark, towering over me as she stared down. For a moment, my brain couldn't process what I was seeing, a cold dread flooding through me so quickly that it made my stomach twist, bile rising in my throat as I screamed, the sound raw and terrified in the quiet room. It was a dreadful, horrifying feeling, seeing her there, so close, so silent, as if she had been standing there, watching me sleep, waiting for me to wake up. Then, without warning, she lunged forward, her hands grabbing around my throat, her fingers cold and bony as they closed around my neck. "You piece of," she started to say, the words hissing out of her mouth over and over, her grip tightening slightly with each repetition. It was an older woman, her face lined and her hair wild, but her grip was weak, her hands trembling even as she tried to hold on. Panic and adrenaline surged through me, and I managed to break free, pushing her away as I scrambled out of bed, my feet hitting the floor with a dull thud. I could hear her behind me as I ran for the door, her footsteps shuffling quickly across the carpet, but she stopped short as I flung the door open, the bright hallway light flooding in as I bolted out of the room. I didn't stop to look back. I just ran down the long, empty hallway, my breath loud in my ears, my heart pounding so hard it hurt, until I reached the front desk, slamming my hands on the counter as I gasped for air, trying to get the words out. The woman at the front desk looked at me, her eyes wide, and then her face shifted, something like guilt or fear crossing her features. She admitted in a low voice that one of the employees had lost a master key, a key that could open every room in the hotel. It was something they were obligated to report to the head of the hotel, but they hadn't. I was furious, shaking with anger and leftover fear as I demanded answers, my voice rising as I tried to make them understand how serious this was. They refunded me for the night, and I gave my statement to the police, explaining everything in detail. The image of that woman's face burned into my mind as I described what had happened. Afterward, I went home. My dad was there, and for the first time in a long time, he looked at me with something close to sympathy as I explained what had happened, the fear and the shaking in my voice making him go quiet. Ever since that night, I've never had to leave the house again after a fight. Somehow, things shifted, and I hope it stays that way, that I never have to run to a hotel to escape again. Oh, and as for that crazy woman, the one who tried to kill me in my sleep, I have absolutely no idea what happened to her, and a part of me hopes I never find out.